And of course, what that did is it enabled Chairman Powell to not lower interest rates, which absolutely hurts cryptocurrency in Trump's vision to help get people invested into, to make cryptocurrency less volatile, to make it more attractive to invest in, so we can get off the dollar and get back into gold, silver, and now cryptocurrency, blockchain technology, which makes financial transactions faster and enables you to have what's called the store of value, where you don't have to use banks. You could literally abolish the entire banking system if you had a cryptocurrency system in place. And of course, the Federalists don't like this. So it's an age-old battle, which we're going to get into. But what happened is Trump was informed that our country's jobs numbers are being produced by a Biden appointee named Dr. Erica Muckentarfer, the Commissioner of Labor Statistics, who faked the jobs numbers before the election to try and boost Kamala's chances of victory. This is the same Bureau of Labor Statistics that overstated jobs growth in March 2024 by approximately 818,000, and then again right before the 2024 presidential election in August and September by 112,000. These were records. No one can be that wrong, right? We need accurate job numbers. I have directed my team to fire this Biden political appointee immediately. She will be replaced with someone much more competent and qualified. Important numbers like this must be fair and accurate. They can't be manipulated for political purposes. Muckentarfer said that there were only 73,000 jobs added, a shock. But more importantly, that a major mistake was made by them. 258,000 jobs downward in the prior 2 months. Similar things happened in the first part of the year, always to the negative. The economy is booming under Trump, despite a Fed that also plays games, this time with interest rates, where they lowered them twice and substantially just before the presidential election, I assume in hopes of getting Kamala elected. How did that work out? Jerome Too Late Powell should also be put out to pasture. Thank you for your attention to this matter. And so I'll just show you a little illustration here. So in September 18th of 2024, Powell cut the rates by 0.50 percentage points to 4.75%. And then in November, he cut the rates by 0.25 percentage points to 4.50% to 4.75%. Biden's inflation was up 9.1%. 9.1%. That's when the Fed is supposed to increase rates. In other words, take liquidity out of the market. But they reduced the rates for Sleepy Joe. So we know what side the Federal Reserve Bank is on. They're on the side of the left. They don't like Trump. They know that he wants to abolish the private banking cartels, and they're doing everything they can to harm his presidency. So the only tool that Trump has left at his disposal are tariffs, because he can weaken the dollar that way and force the Fed to lower interest rates. So again, that's what really happened. So as a lawyer, I can tell you that the circumstantial evidence is obvious and clear to me that the Federal Reserve Bank is carrying water for the Federalists. They don't like Trump, and they want to get him out of power. We just saw a video of someone who works for Jerome Powell saying that Powell wants to be remembered as the man who stopped Trump. So there you go. Most government employees are highly political, contrary to what you're told in the public school system, and they lean far left. And they also run academia. So what do you expect? Why do you think kids, especially people who go to colleges, are so anti-federalist? Okay, so that's the reason. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get into a video from Michael Bolton of the 10th Amendment Center, who I consider to be a visionary. I consider this guy to be one of the most educated, pro-constitutionalist people I've ever seen or met in my life. And I'm going to let you watch part of this video, and then we're going to get back into the main show where I discuss cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. So here we go.
And amplify a message in support of the Constitution and liberty, whether the establishment, the government wants us to or not. And I should mention, I'm going to cite a bunch of stuff in this episode. I've got a few other episodes. I've got a bunch of articles and original source documents. You're going to find those over at 10thamendmentcenter.com/path-to-liberty. I publish a blog post for each individual episode about 1 to 2 hours after the live stream is done. And there you're going to find a show links section where I'm including all the stuff that I'm mentioning so you can read and learn more in context on your own time. Let's start out with an article by Mike Meharry. This is a great way to sum it up. The Federal Reserve is the engine that drives the biggest, most powerful government in the history of the world. That's not a government of few and defined powers, as James Madison described it. Unfortunately, the people for generations and generations have let it get out of control and in many cases begged for it. But the Federal Reserve is the tool that they use to be able to actually prop this whole system up. Mike goes on, he says, we can trace the origins of this modern central bank back to the creation of the first Bank of the United States, even before ratification of the Bill of Rights. I've done a couple of episodes trying to answer the question of when things went off the rails. When did we go from a limited constitutional republic to the monster state we have of today? And to the founders and the old revolutionaries, it was really about precedent. And when you establish a precedent for them to take, as Thomas Jefferson said in his argument against Hamilton's Bank, which I will get to a little bit later on the show, if you take a single step beyond the limits of the Constitution, you take a boundless field of power, no longer susceptible of any definition. We'll see if I get that quote right off the top of my head. And so I've often cited 1791, the creation of the first bank, as the moment things went off the rails. Anyways, Mike goes on. He says, even then, it was built on dubious constitutional justifications. He's being kind. But it wasn't created without a fight. The arguments advanced by the bank's opponents provide a great deal of insight into the original understanding of the Constitution and the American system as it was conceived. The original Constitution, which only really lasted because of the bank for just a couple of years. And Mike points out that the story is about more than central banking. And I know we're talking about the Federal Reserve, but the powers that they use to create this and what they use to fund because of it goes way beyond just the creation of a bank. He said it's really a battle for the heart and soul of America's constitutional system. He says if you understand the constitutional arguments against the first bank of the U.S., and here we're going to hear from Edmund Randolph, Thomas Jefferson, and James Madison, three very influential figures at the time of the founding, he said you will have a solid grasp on the constitutional.
And so these guys are what we call anti-federalists. The Hamiltonians, the ones that are worshipped by the modern Marxist academia state, they're the people that are the federalists. Hamiltonians are federalists. The anti-federalists were the majority at the time of the Revolution. The federalists were more aligned with the king and the British economic system. So just so you understand, Hamilton didn't really become into favor until after what I consider to be the illegal and treasonous pact made at Jekyll Island in 1913, where our treasonous president enabled the Federal Reserve Act to be passed, where our lives are now controlled by the IRS and private banking cartels. Let's keep going.
Arguments against much of the unconstitutional monster state we live under today. Now, we know, and as I just mentioned right at the beginning, for those of you looking at the screen, this is my favorite Alexander Hamilton picture. It's him gagged. I was going to show a picture of the Aaron Burr thing, but, well, that's for maybe another episode. But the bank was the brainchild of Alexander Hamilton. Surprise, surprise. It was vehemently opposed by those three Virginians. But Hamilton wanted this as a tool to do all kinds of stuff. He was a supporter of a big, big government, something that would, well, no one really supported what he really wanted to go for, and that's why he had to flip-flop. He proposed one thing, or he said one thing before ratification, and then right after ratification, especially leading up to the creation of the bank, suddenly he started finding things like implied powers. So he couldn't justify the bank on the delegated powers in the Constitution. There was no debate over that. People were very clear, and you'd see this over and over in the debates, like, okay, we can't find it expressly delegated, so, well, how do you find this power? Now, people who are honest and doing the right thing, they're not going to try to first start out with what they want.
So I'll just give you, again, so most of you don't know my legal background if you're new to the channel. So I became a lawyer on the California State Bar Law Office Study Program.